Welcome again, everyone, to Trail Tales. This is Tom Funk, your host. Thanks for joining me again for another episode of I hike across Michigan's Upper Peninsula entitled A Million Steps, which is an unpublished manuscript that, I just decided I was going to put it out as a podcast. Well, I'm in Pictured Rocks, and let's see if I survive the night, as it was a cold one, and I had ditched my sleeping bag. I'm starting to think maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So, get dressed, get warm, and let's get going. So I start at Potato Patch, and I'm going to end at Beaver Creek backcountry campsite. 13 miles today, and it's going to be a grand total of 285.7 for the grand total that I've hiked so far. Weather 80 degrees for high, low of 40. There's clear skies and only a little bit of wind. Bug factor range from nothing to a factor of 3. And we're on trails today. There's some very steep slopes. Roots and rocks abound along with a little bit of sand. Why are there trees I never walk under but large and melodious thoughts descend upon me? Walt Whitman, American poet. Listening to the sounds of the morning, I wake to my chattering teeth. It's colder than a witch's tit in a brass bra, and I don't think I slept more than 15 minutes in a row last night. My sleeping style imitated the elk. Big, cumbersome, constantly nodding in and out of consciousness, trying to keep aware of my surroundings and to avoid predators. My predator? Well, it's hypothermia. And if it rained last night, I could have been in some trouble. But with other humans around, I think I would have been all right. Every night so far on my trip, it hasn't sunk below 55 degrees or so. Last night, it had to have been around 40. Thick dew attached itself to every living thing, living and man-made. A searing cup of cocoa would go down real good right now. Releasing what little heat was left, I pulled myself out of my sack. Pulling on my pants over my long underwear, I mosey over to Jerry and Sunu's camp. Good morning, I say, shivering. Did you keep warm last night? Jerry asks, stirring a cup of coffee. Hell no, I froze my ass off. Makes me reconsider my decision, I say, firing up my gas stove. Too late now, and I'm not giving you my bag either, he says jokingly. At about 7:30 a.m., John, Chris, Emily, and Damon were over, ready to take on the new day. We exchanged a few addresses and emails. We jokingly dubbed our group the Potato Patch Club while taking a few photos. They were all headed towards Munising, I towards Grand Marais. Their weekend of fun was over, and I have 1/3 of my trip to go. Spending my day flirting with death, I will walk along the escarpment edging Lake Superior. Give the respect she deserves, and all will be well. The last time I walked this route was on a mid-June day. Sean and I did not expect what she threw at us. Cold, miserable rain, and zero visibility. Heck, we even saw ice floating in the water, and it was mid-June. Sean and I started our trip at the parking lot near Chapel Lake. We hiked in about 3 miles to the dreaded Mosquito River campground. There we were eaten alive. The next day we made it to Coves, where again the bugs drove us insane. By this point, Sean was in some serious pain, especially his back. This was his first and currently his last backpacking trip. He had bought hundreds of dollars worth of equipment, Eureka tent, internal frame backpack, vast hiking boots, along with all the sleeping bags, clothes, and other equipment. The weight and strain were too much for him. All he had to show for it was all this brand new equipment and a very content salesman who sold him his stuff. The following day, we headed back towards our car. We camped at Chapel Beach, where we enjoyed the howl of the wind off of Gitchigumi, as if it were telling us to get the heck out of there. We safely made it to our car the following day. 4 days, 3 nights, and he was shot. This is my triumphant return, relying on those thoughts from a couple of years ago to finish what I had started. Walking along, watching the roots and rocks and sporadic sand, I start to realize that this trail is not so bad. A few steep climbs and descents, but this is no Isle Royal. This is easy going. For one, I could see for miles. For the other, the weather is spectacular. And third, Sean is not here groaning in pain. This is easy hiking. Traversing along the famous pictured rocks every quarter mile, there would be a scenic pullout, a small spur leading from the trail to the edge of a cliff. There, a myriad of color, rocks painted by Van Gogh or Matisse. Layered earth tones, mostly yellows and browns, are seemingly similar to a layered cake. My eyes gobble up the scenery, and I cannot but resist taking photographs. Words cannot describe what my eyes behold in front of me. You have to experience this firsthand. The thought that travels through my mind is why most Michiganians have never visited this jewel, and more so, the fact that so many people don't even know this exists. Disturbing, to say the least, that a 40-mile-long park on the largest lake in the world goes unrecognized and unvisited. Being only 72,000 acres, it is by far not the biggest national park. I'd have to guess a visitorship between 100 and 250,000 people a year. Promise that this park would attract 1 million people a year. Rumor has it that many locals back in the 60s and 70s were misled with some bad information. Personally, I feel this is far-fetched. And do you really want 1 million people visiting this beautiful area? The big holdup was allowing more visitors is that the only road in the area, H58, which connects Grand Marais and Munising, is a 2-track nightmare in many stretches. After a good rain, it can become impassable. Heck, in the middle of the winter, it's a snowmobile trail. And if it becomes too dry, it's not common to bog down in the dusty sand. This prevents the RVs and the faint of heart to travel into the interior of the park. In the early 1990s, the National Park Service proposed to clear a road practically 50 feet from the edge of the escarpment, pave it, provide scenic turnouts, bathrooms, gift shops, etc. to increase attendance. Outraged at this proposal, I wrote to the Park Service in opposition of this ludicrous plan. It would, for all intents and purposes, mean that the Lakeshore Trail, and already 3 miles of it, is on this H58, and it would be replaced by a thread of asphalt with its choking fumes from internal combustion wheelchairs. Not to mention the destruction caused by the bulldozers, asphalt machines, and other activities only provide improved access to this little-used national park. I am all for accessibility to national parks, but sometimes there's too much accessibility. Do we really need roads to get to every nook and cranny of this park? Heck, while you're at it, why don't you put in some ski lifts to get these lazy bastards up to the top of these hills? Heck, don't stop there. Put a McDonald's in so they can continue to choke their arteries with fat. Why don't we keep it like it is and allow those, like myself, a chance to wander more than 500 feet from pavement to enjoy nature? Anyway, that proposal, it was shot down. I continue my walk, car-free and carefree through the woods. I find myself enjoying nature's Van Gogh. The views are uplifting, especially when I realize that the last time I walked here, they were blanketed by fog. Disappointed 2 years ago, I showed up to see the paintings and they were still covered in fabric. For the most part, I find myself high and dry on sandy soils, but occasionally I do venture into a swampy area. Covered in black muck, this current area is complete with simple one-plank boardwalk to keep my feet from getting wet. Visibility is reduced to near zero, and I can only see 20 or so feet in any direction due to thick mountain ash, birch, and striped maple. Crash! Thump! Bear! The only 2 animals that can make that much noise is a moose or a bear, and maybe a third animal, Homo sapiens. Not known to this area, moose are out of the question, and humans would not go crashing through the brush instead of using a well-marked trail. I pull out my whistle. Tweet! Tweet! Leave me alone, I yell. I'm right here, I yell. The creature returns my volley with more crashing and thrashing in the brush. He cannot be more than 30 feet from me, walking parallel to me, but in the opposite direction. I turn my back up the trail and walk backwards, blowing my whistle, slogging through muck. Shit, 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 shit! Anxiety takes over, and I start moving, letting the treads in the muck lead me to safety. I stop, I look at the ground. Heavily used by humans, the muck shows every brand of boot possible. A Solo, Merrill, Bear, Vask. Bear? The boot prints laid down the most recently were not from a leather and lace variety, but from a furry and clawed type, Ursus americanus. That was a bear walking through the brush. It must have heard me coming, cup clanging away, and gave me a wide berth. Breathing heavily and sweating, I weigh my options. Only one to contemplate, I must forge on. Bear are part of the deal up here, and being properly prepared, I avoided having another unwanted encounter. About a half hour goes by since my bear counter, and I make it past Indian Head Point. I start to run into unprepared Turons. I hesitate to call them hikers. At least a hiker brings water with them. These guys, no water. These unprepared souls, wearing only shorts and carrying no water or any other supply, I seem overprepared as I stomp by. Grand Portal Point juts out into Gitchagumi, rewarding me with a view of the rocks to the southwest and a clear sandy beach to my northeast. I stand and absorb the moment. I am truly happy. I am in my element. Walking up the hill is a dog, a collie, and is leading his master. Since this is a backcountry area, dogs are not allowed. First hearing my cup clanging, then seeing my body hurtling towards his, he finds it necessary to speak to me. Making that racket is totally unnecessary, he exhales, huffing and puffing. I stop. Excuse me, sir? There's no bear in this area. A noisemaker ruins it for the rest of us. The rest of us? The rest of us? Obviously a Turon, and I feel compelled to let this guy know a few things. And I say, you know that this is a backcountry area and dogs are not allowed in this area, and do you know why? No, he says. I just encountered a bear about 1 mile back. If you love your pet, you'll leave now. If not, I hope I don't read about you in the newspaper. And with saying that, I continue to walk towards northeast, letting him mull over his options and decide his own fate. If a dog and a human encounter a bear in the backcountry, especially a mother bear, the bear can interpret the fellow canine as a threat. I don't even want to imagine what would happen, but an all-out dog-bear brawl is not out of the question. For that reason, a dog should not enter the backcountry. The man and his quote-unquote best friend continue walking in the opposite direction. I feel sorry for the dog. I would not want to have his owner. Descending the escarpment towards the beginning of the beach, I pass a few backpackers. One group composed of 3 men, none of which were wearing any sort of shirt. Those rubbing shoulder straps have to hurt, and I hope they brought some blister cream with them. Walking into a small cove at the base of some rocks, the trail winds around the cove and back up a monster hill. Here, I cannot tell where the trail officially goes. Therefore, I remember my geometry lesson. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And I proceed down a steep bank towards the cove with the beach just a quarter mile from there. I arrive at the bottom and have to scheme around some deadfall and rocks, and I emerge from the tunnel created by 2 rock faces and the shadows provided by them. Backpacking, I garner an enormous amount of attention on the beach. Tourists sit up on their blankets, children stop in their tracks, teenagers are static holding their frisbees as they see a freak of nature walking past. Eventually, I reach the mouth of Chapel River, cross over the sandstone holding the lightly rushing water in suspension before trickling to Lake Superior. I eat lunch, refill on water, and proceed to nap. Brutally awakened by a group of 20 or so teens walking across the rickety bridge, I quickly rise from my slumber. Awakening, I see 2 young men, about 20, inscribing their Greek fraternity letters using sandstone to wear away the resident algae in the riverbed. Groggy, I come to my senses, compelled to say something, anything, since I am not a fan of the Greek system. Hey, guys, you better hope a ranger doesn't see you doing that, I say, rubbing my eyes. These 2 men look at me through their fancy sunglasses and return to their vandalism. Like the drunk fishermen, these boys are compensating for something and resort to vandalism. I lift my pack onto my weary back and proceed to move on. Chapel Beach was too crowded for me, even though there were only 50 or so people there, and they had to walk 3 or so miles under their own power to reach the scenic spot. Sometimes, even distance does not weed out the Turons. I have to climb the escarpment 200 feet above my current position. Taking a deep breath, I start to climb. Coming down the hill is a tan-clad man carrying a 6-foot-long walking stick. About 55 years of age, it's a ranger. I stop, knowing that he'll want to check out my permit. Howdy! If that isn't a backcountry ranger, I say, excited to see him. Well, actually, I'm a volunteer in the park, a VIP, but I can write tickets if I have to, he says, with a grin. Not carrying a gun, he does have a radio and a ticket book. Mind if I check your permit? Certainly, I say. I'm glad you're out here to keep me honest. Well, I have to run into plenty of dishonest ones out here, he says. You wouldn't believe half the stories I have, yanking on my permit. Oh, yes, I would. I work for a zoo. Really? Which one? He says. Binder Park, Battle Creek. I say these words for the first time in a while. Wow, that felt weird. Never heard of it. Looks like you're good to go. Any questions or comments for me? As a matter of fact, when you go to the river mouth, you'll see two fraternity brothers etching their Greek letters into the sandstone in the river. Told them not to do it just in case a ranger came along. And of course they ignored me. Can't believe the timing. He's only minutes away from the river. Thanks. I'll check it out. And enjoy your trip. And he hurriedly runs off towards Chapel Beach to bust the scofflaws. Greeted by parched riverbeds, I must be high on the land. If it were not so arid, these would be trickling with water. Indeed, the only rivers with water are the ones in the valleys. However, I have come upon a river rushing hurriedly towards Lake Superior as if it is late for an important date. A small sign to my left reads, Spray Falls. Up this trail is a waterfall created by the Spray River, ejecting its contents 100 feet above the lake below. Perched perilously above the greatest of Great Lakes, Spray Falls is higher than Tequamanon Falls. I realize, too, that I am gingerly walking along fragile sandstone about 10 feet from the mouth of this little creek. I cannot see where the water goes, and if I try to get any closer, I also would become part of Lake Superior and probably not be found for a week or two. My brain takes over my lust to see the falls, and I back off, returning to the trail. I should soon reach the expansive beach called 12 Mile. Right now, the pictured rocks have been reduced to boulders and chunks of sandstone 20 to 50 feet high between the lake and the shore. Not allowed here, swimming is just plain stupid, and it's not because of some bureaucrat's decree it has been banned. Walking past Cove's campground, where Sean and I had to flee the beach to avoid the massive hungry hordes of bugs, the trail here is familiar, except it is much easier than what I remembered. I remember toiling along with Sean, probably because I had my gallbladder removed recently, and I was in terrible, awful shape. Now, I am a pillar of health, mentally and physically. I also know what I'm doing. The trail yields a sandy element, and I am slowly reaching lake level. Walking to a river crossing where a bridge will take me to the other side, I am in somewhat of a canyon. The maple beech and hemlock cap tops greet me before a small footbridge. Crossing the bridge, I hug the river, slowly meandering its way through the forest. A quarter-mile in, the tunnel ends at the lake where the river glides across a plain of fine white sand and makes its way into Gitche Gumee. I see several people walking around with backpacks. This is a good sign. I am miles away from the nearest road, and this only tells me there's a campground nearby. Scanning the slope, I see a sign. Beaver Creek Campground to the right. Lakeshore Trail to the left. This did not make sense, but I am not going to argue with the sign. I guess it's because I have to climb about 75 feet to get to the top of the riverbank. Once I do so, I see about 6 sites scattered about in the forest comprising of jack, pine, and red oak. I take the first site I see, which is the farthest from the lake. From a past experience, I learned not to camp directly next to a large body of water. Recalling back to an Earthwatch research expedition I took in Canada, upon our arrival, we had to search out our own places to camp. There were no campsites like we have here. We had to make our own. Almost everyone on my team made his or her encampment right next to the lake called Rabbit Lake. This lake is your typical cold, deep Canadian lake. A steep bank of solid Canadian shield bounded the edge, and almost everyone loved the view, which faced west. I chose to make my site back in the woods under a massive white pine tree. I was very close to a still bay of water connecting to Rabbit Lake. Mosquito infested for sure, I was questioned by the participants, but not the researchers, of my choice. I merely shrugged it off. Well, they all found out why I placed my tent where I did. It was not because I had a fondness for mosquitoes. Actually, there are several minor reasons and one major reason. If you pitch your tent on the edge of a large lake facing west, you are bound to deal with several conditions. First, the sun sets very late and the light shines into your tent well into the night. Second, any lake breeze goes right through your tent fabric, chilling you to the bone. On about the 6th day of our 14-day adventure, they all found out why I chose this particular site to pitch my tent. We were about ready to go out onto our field stations, and a storm of biblical proportions bellowed through the region. The wind was robust, but it was the buckets of rain that fell on us that truly had us worried. In Canada, as here, you are miles from a doctor, therefore hypothermia is a concern. A wet tent sucks because it would be the same as coating the inside of your house using water from your garden hose. At the time, we all huddled under a tarp next to our supply tent for about 4 hours as we witnessed over 6 inches of rain. I stood smugly under the canopy while my fellow teammates constantly worried about their tents and their contents getting ruined by the wind and the rain. When the rain subsided, I was the only one not to hot trot to check out the damage. I wasn't worried in the least. After everyone's tent was examined, it was evident that I had the only dry tent. Not believing me, my teammates asked to see my tent. I led a small group back to my tent and pointed to the white pine. "See that?" I said. "It's a natural umbrella. Pines tend to shed water away from their branches to the edge. Very little water directly hit my tent, and what little did was slowed by the needles," I said. Unzipping the tent, I looked inside to my bag and backpack. Everything was dry. When I have a choice camping, I tend to find the tallest white pine with ample canopy cover for my bivouac. I've done so several times on this trip. Since there are no white pines in the area, I chose to be away from the lake to avoid the breeze. There are 5 other groups here, and I am the only solo hiker. I cook supper and go to the lake to do some laundry and even swim. Yes, swimming in Lake Superior. I wish my dad were with me right now. He would not believe I'm swimming in a lake that is usually around 45 degrees. This past winter was a warm one, no ice formed, and it kept the temperature of the lake elevated. A blue ribbon spring helped keep the temperature higher than normal, raising it to its balmy 65 degrees. Later, a group of teens led by a 20-year-old beatnik-looking fellow arrived at camp, having nowhere to stay. Of course, being a nice guy, I let them stay on my site. From Ortonville, the leader, whom I didn't get his name, was leading 1 boy and 3 girls from Munising to Grand Marais. Emotionally impaired, this is kind of like an outward bound type experience. Again, this group also overpacked. Well, grossly overpacked. For a 5-day hike, they each brought a change of clothes for every day on the trail. To top it off, they were not even carrying their own food. The leader was. Again, canned food. It took 4 of us to lug his 75-pound pack up the top of a bear pole. The 6 sites agreed to take part in starting a fire for the night. It was my job to find tinder. We had a couple in camp that were evidently newlyweds, and I don't think she knew the first thing about backpacking, and he thought he knew everything. It was his job to find large, dead branches. I carefully searched for flakes of white birch, dead balsam fir, and bark from a red pine. All of that is scarce on top of this ancient dune. I do prevail, painstakingly borrowing these items from the forest. This guy, on the other hand, doesn't borrow from the forest, he brutally takes. He dons his tree climbing gear. Okay, he brought tree climbing gear, people, on a backpacking trip. Good Lord. And he scrambles up several oak trees with a bandsaw and whacks several large but dead branches and drags them to the fire pit. With an axe, this overpacker, he hacks the branches into manageable pieces. "What is that stuff? I thought you were going to get tinder to start the fire," the overpacker says in a bragging tone. "I did. All I need is a match," I say, wanting to tell this guy, "You're an idiot," but he is holding an axe. You can argue with an old woman and frat geeks, but you shouldn't argue with a crazy man holding a sharp object. "You mean something like this," he says, and pulls out his miniature torch out of his front pocket. Resembling a gun, he pulls the trigger and a blue flame emerges from the barrel. What an idiot. Who let this guy in here? I swear national parks should give you an IQ test before entering. "Where'd you get all that oak?" I asked, leading him to give me an answer so I can slam him in front of the 10 or so people congregating around the fire pit wondering what the hell this guy's up to. I climbed some trees and sawed them off, he says with pride. Ah, I see you practice leave no trace, I say with some cynicism. I don't think he knew what I meant. The others in the group did, and they were struggling to hold in their snickers. One man even got up and left, disgusted with the sad excuse of a backpacker. Leave no trace? Well, it's foreign to this overpacker. He continues to whack at the red oak, perplexed, probably wondering, what does leave no trace mean? The fire starts with one match and is enjoyed by all. The overpacker retires to his tent surrounded by as many conveniences as he could carry with him. His poor wife has no clue what an idiot he is. Alright, you run into all kinds on a backpacking trip, I guess. I by no means am perfect, but you ain't gonna see me climb up a tree with an axe, cut off branches. I would like to note that Chris and John, we stayed in touch after my backpacking trip, and then we actually did a part of the North Country Trail together up in northern Michigan, the Jordan River Trail. Then we lost touch with each other again, and one day I was in Muskegon, and I was doing a presentation at a library, and they showed up, and we got in touch again. And then we lost touch with each other again, and when I was working at Cabela's a few years ago, in my off-season, he came in, and we kind of looked at each other, and we recognized each other, and started chatting, and he then informed me that his wife, Chris, had passed away from cancer, and I told him about all the things I had done, and, all that stuff, and he was pretty impressed, and he said he wanted to get back into backpacking, but I think he's like in his mid to late 70s right now, and he was kind of in poor and declining health. So a nice gesture he did is he actually got a photograph of us three together, and he came back and visited me at Cabela's later and gave it to me. And I actually brought that with me to Abu Dhabi, where I'm currently at. So, yeah, good people. And, boy, I'd like to get a hold of him again and just kind of get caught up. So, yeah, sometimes you make friends that last a long time on the trail, and sometimes you only meet them for a few minutes, and, it just leads into other great things. All right, well, thanks for joining me. We're going to continue this again tomorrow as I continue my hike through Pictured Rocks. Thanks for joining me. This is Tom Funk with Trail Tales, and we'll see you again.